In today's video, you'll see a child who spent his entire childhood living in the jungle, and there is a girl who was intentionally left among ferocious animals upon her birth. First, let's look at this feral woman who lived among monkeys for several decades. Number 20. Rochon Pinyeng. The year was 1989 when 8-year-old Rochon Pinyeng disappeared while herding water buffalo in a remote part of Cambodia. Efforts by her family to trace her remained futile until 2 decades later when a naked woman covered in mud and walking like a monkey appeared to the locals in Cambodia. When pictures of the woman started doing rounds on the internet, her biological family was able to identify her as their daughter and reunited with her. The family realized that all that while, their daughter was being raised by monkeys, so it's no wonder she couldn't speak or eat normally despite being a mature woman. Number 19. Victor de Aviron. After spending his entire childhood living in the jungle and being raised by animals, it comes naturally that Victor de Aviron is among the world's most famous feral children. What makes him even more famous is that his story was portrayed in the 1969 movie The Wild Child. Victor was found in the late 18th century at the age of 11 in the Cornwoods in France seeking acorns and roots to eat. His appearance was that of a vagabond at the time, with bruises all over and signs of having suffered smallpox. Number 18. Danielle Leroux. When others yap east-west home's best, to others like Danielle Leroux, this common phrase has got no meaning. I mean, when you're abandoned in your own home in a hostile environment, nothing sounds good about being home. Danielle Leroux was spotted by a neighbor through a broken window. The neighbor notified detectives who were shocked to find the little skeletal girl curled on a moldy mattress covered in maggots and flies. She was detached from the rest of the world, was afraid of humans, and couldn't even speak. Number 17. Bello the Chimp Boy. After being abandoned by his parents, Bello, a mentally impaired boy born into a nomadic group called Fulani, was lucky to be adopted by kind animals. Chimpanzees took care of the little 1-year-old boy for about a year before he was found living comfortably in a family of chimps in 1996 in the Falgore Forest, north of Nigeria. Bello, by then 2 years old, was already behaving like a chimpanzee. His movements were that of chimpanzees, and he would make chimpanzee-like noises. Sadly, Bello died in 2005 after living most of his life like a chimp. Number 16. Enal and the Sharks. Depending on where you're born, you're likely to adopt some peculiar behaviors that may turn out to be quite unusual to other people. And one little boy named Enal from Indonesia is a case in point. Born in a fishing community, Enal learned more from sea animals and didn't even attend school, and he eventually ended up spending most of his time in the water, bonding and interacting with sea animals, especially sharks, which he considers his pets. Number 15. Natasha Mikhailova. At the young age of 5, Natasha Mikhailova was discovered by police officers in 2009 locked inside an apartment in Siberia. And to the surprise of the police, she was living with only cats and dogs. Upon investigation, it was discovered that her father and grandparents abandoned her in the apartment. Seems the young girl had been living with the animals for years, considering that she was already learning the animals' behavior and communicated in barks and ate with her tongue. Number 14. Ung Chaidi. Ung Chaidi was just playing in jungle fields near her village with her cousin back in 1974 when they suddenly went missing. After trying hard to trace themselves back home without success, they decided to turn the jungle of Myanmar into a home. However, the next day a heavy storm flooded the forest and her cousin was washed away, leaving Ung Chaidi alone in the jungle. Her parents searched for her relentlessly but could not find her, and so they thought they'd never meet their daughter again. However, 40 years later, rumors started spreading of a woman living in the jungle. When her parents went to check, they discovered it was their daughter, and they reunited in a colorful ceremony. Number 13. Dog Boy from Chile. Back in June 2001, authorities in Chile were shocked to pull an 11-year-old boy from the freezing waters of the Pacific Ocean. The young boy had been abandoned by his parents and was forced to survive in a cave in southern Chile with a pack of stray dogs. For the 2 years in the cave, the young boy only survived by scavenging for food with the dogs and drinking milk from the teat of a female dog that gave birth during the period. Shockingly, the boy had adapted to this tough life that he even resisted rescue. Number 12. John Cebunya. John Sebunya was just a normal Ugandan kid, but he was forced to run away from his home after witnessing his father kill his mother, and the only place he found solace was deep in the Ugandan jungle, where he would end up spending his life with a group of green African monkeys known as vervet. For about a year, the monkeys taught John how to climb trees and search for food. 3 years later, John was rescued and reintegrated back into society. Number 11. Umtiane the Monkey Boy. Another feral child from Uganda on this list is Umtiane the Monkey Boy. He was discovered in the forest living among a group of monkeys. Umtiane had mastered life in the wild and was even behaving like a monkey. In fact, when he was taken back to school for the first time, he had no trust in anyone and would prefer to spend most of the time squatting. Number 10. Marcos Rodriguez Pantoja. Marcos Pantoja lived in an abusive family, and his father was daring enough to sell him to an old man at the age of 6. However, when the old man who lived far from civilization died, Marcos had no other choice but to join the wild. He was lucky enough to meet kind wolves and snakes that protected him and fended for him. But after 12 years of living among the wolves and learning their way of life, Marcos was lucky to be rescued by some guards who took him to an orphanage where he learned to be human again. Number 9. The Leopard Boy. Back in 1912, a female leopard kidnapped a 2-year-old boy in a remote village in India while his mother was working in the field. The boy lived with the leopard for about 3 years until a hunter killed the leopard. It was at this point that the boy was rescued and reunited with his parents. Number 8. Shamdio. Here is another feral boy with a strange story. In 1976, Shamdio was discovered living among wolf cubs in a forest in the north of India. He was only 4 years old, but surprisingly, he had totally transformed to behave like a wolf. He had long hooked fingernails, matted hair, and he could not even speak. But after being taken to an orphanage, he learned how to bathe and dress. Unfortunately though, Shamdio died a few years later in 1985. Number 7. Sujit Kumar. If you thought only wild animals can be kind enough to raise humans, then you are wrong. Apparently, even chickens can play a parental role when parents neglect their roles. And that's the case of this Fijian boy named Sujit Kumar, who was abandoned by his parents at birth. For the rest of his childhood, Sujit remained locked in a chicken coop, adapting to a chicken's way of life. Luckily, he was rescued by Good Samaritans, and today he's now learning to be human again. Number 6. Sasha T. While some people can't stand even an hour in the same room with a goat, it turns out there is a young boy in Russia who has spent most of his life living among goats after being abandoned by his mother. Sasha T was kept in a room with goats for several years, and he has not learned how to speak, eat, or even use a potty. Luckily, Sasha T was rescued and taken into care by a social worker in Russia. Number 5. Vanya Yudin. Vanya Yudin of Russia, unlike many of the feral kids on this list, lived with his mother. However, his mother was too busy to take care of Yudin, so she would leave him locked in a 2-room apartment with bird cages filled with dozens of birds. His mother never spoke to him and treated him like one of her pets. And for this reason, Vanya had no friends but the birds. He was forced to adapt to the birds' behavior, and by the time he was rescued at the age of 7, Vanya could not even speak. He could only chirp and flap his arms as though he was a winged animal. Number 4. Hadara. Hadara was only 2 when his parents lost him in the Sahara Desert. And with nowhere to run for safety, it all seemed like life would come to an end for this young boy. Luckily though, he got adopted by ostriches. For the next decade, Hadara lived with the long-legged bird family, learning their way of life. One day, wanderers were crossing the desert when they saw the boy and rescued him. And with that, it's now time for today's best pick. Today's image shows a feral girl who seems to be living in a dog kennel. Let's find out more about this feral girl with Number 3. Oksana Malaya. Oksana Malaya was born like any other normal child. However, one day her alcoholic parents abandoned her out in the cold. So she crawled to a dog kennel at least to get some warmth, and that was the beginning of her life as a feral child living among dogs. For about 5 years she lived with the dogs, trying to learn from them in all manners. She was rescued at the age of 8 and has now learned to speak and behave like any other human being. Number 2. Lobo. After the tragic end of her parents' lives in the mid-19th century in a town called Dolores near Devil's River, Lobo was adopted by wolves. Although people thought she had died, she was safe in the wild, learning to do everything a wolf could do. She walked on all fours with a pack of wolves and even ate freshly killed gang meat. At one point, she was captured by cowboys, but the wolves came to her rescue. Since then, no one knows the whereabouts of Lobo. Number 1. Tipi Degre. The story of Tipi Degre is rather unique. After being born in Namibia to a French couple, for whatever reason, Tipi's parents decided that she would not have a normal childhood but would be raised among wild animals. And so, for the first 10 years of her life, Tipi spent time running with elephants and making friendships with some of the most ferocious animals on Earth. Later, Tipi was returned to France by her parents. Popularly known as the real-life Mowgli, Tipi has become a point of interest to many people worldwide, especially after writing a book about her life and appearing in several documentaries. Thanks for watching.